We are streaming.
Lovely, lovely. Welcome, everyone. We welcome you this beautiful Wednesday to our next session in the Gleanings course study for 2025. This is session number 9. Just to recap where we are dealing with the Gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah. This course will delve into selected tablets and extracts from the writings of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith. We will be using the Ocean 2.0 version of Gleanings. While this course will not be taken for credit and there is no charge, it will be operated in a similar fashion to a college seminar, with participants strongly encouraged to participate. All discussions will be focused on the material at hand and recorded in case participants wish to review what was discussed in prior sessions. The weekly schedule readings will be posted to the landing page a week before the start of the course. Now, for those of you who have, of course, been with us, and this may be a little bit of repetition, but just a quick introduction to our faculty in this course. It's Peter Terry. He is an author, a teacher, and a scholar with 8 published books, 4 chapters in books, and 50 online papers. His main area of expertise include religious scripture, history, education, philosophy, and theology. He has taught online courses for the Wilmette Institute and presented papers for the Irfan Colloquium and the Association for Baha'i Studies. Recently, he has given presentations on various Baha'i-related subjects for the Clearwater Baha'i community and is a frequent contributor to the Explorations series hosted by the Baha'is of Clearwater, Florida. His talks are available on their website and YouTube channel. Now, if you wish to learn more, feel free to visit their website at www.clearwaterbaha'is.org. Peter, welcome. We're happy to have you. And again, once more, begin this next part of the course.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to tell you where I'm speaking from. Today, I'm speaking from the second floor of the Green Library, which is the largest library at Stanford University. This being Stanford, the actual college that Abdu'l-Baha visited on October 8th, 1912. And he gave us a presentation on the unity of all things. And at the memorial church, which still exists to this day, actually, it's a really beautiful church, all 1,500 of the students attended. Classes were canceled for that day so that they could attend his presentation. And I'm here because there's a growing library of Baha'i material here, and they needed somebody who could advise them about what to get and what to organize and so forth. So now we're going to delve back into the text of Gleanings, which those of you who have been with us from the beginning or even from part of the way along understand to be an absolutely unique and really extraordinary compilation of texts. I think really in some ways we are so gifted to have had a guardian who could not only translate the texts from the Persian and Arabic into English. Many of these have not been published anyplace else. And many of them are drawn from tablets that are not yet available in their entirety, and certainly not available in English in their complete form. And of course, there are also many references to the Kitabi Agan and to the Kitabi Akdas and other tablets that we are perhaps more familiar with and we've encountered in other books. But in any case, there's a lot of material here that you can't find anyplace else. And it's beautifully organized, and organized in a way that's really spiritually inspiring, because it's not just intellectually useful, although many of the subjects that he treats, he will group together tablets in order to communicate that in the most effective way. But sometimes he surprises you by reiterating a subject that was treated many uh, uh, selections earlier, as if I know you're going to forget about this, and it's really important that you remember it now. And so that's one of the charming and satisfying experiences of reading Gleanings, is that we're constantly reminded that the teachings of Baha'u'llah are a whole. They're not just a bunch of disparate elements. And uh, this is really quite challenging for a lot of people to understand, because they assume that Baha'u'llah is a human being, and so he's just going to talk the way we talk, and there will be a sequence of topics, and they'll be dealt with very thoroughly, because that's probably how we would do things. But he's not. He's a manifestation of God. And also, he's speaking to a great variety of individuals. Almost every one of these tablets is written to somebody else. Someone. There are some that were a number actually that were written to a particular individual. For example, Abdul Razak. You will hear that name because there were several passages that were translated from a tablet to Abdul Razak, because they pertain to a number of different topics. So right now we're in the portion of Gleanings which is really dedicated to Baha'u'llah answering questions that he was posed by guys. And the previous selections were talking a lot about the soul and the afterlife. And this is going to go double down into the soul as well. And I'm showing you the actual text as it looks, what it looks like inside of the app, inside of the course. See, because you could see Gleanings inside the app by simply going to Gleanings, and then you could look down until you found the selection that you wanted to read that was part of this particular session, number 9. But you can also go into the course itself and find the readings. And I'm just going to show you how you can do that, just so that for those of you who haven't done it yet and aren't quite sure how to do it, you would go to this. You would find this, and you would look for courses. And once you find courses, you'd click on this. It's the only course that we're showing right now. And then you would scroll down, right? You see, and then it says lessons. So you go to lesson number 9. You click on number 9, and then you keep scrolling, right? You go down. It would be nice if it would actually scroll for me, but all right. So you scroll down. It's just a little bit. And then these readings don't fit into one particular space. We need 2 spaces because there are too many pages to fit into one space. So we click on the first one, right? We go there, and then we scroll again. And right down here, you will see the actual text. And you will see the Roman numeral, and the Roman numeral has a yellow highlight. And that means that there's a note that's attached to it. Anything with a yellow highlight. Now, in some people's computers, you will see a blue line. I don't understand why, but it doesn't matter. Whether you have a blue line or a yellow highlight, it's the same thing. Okay. So you would click on it, and then you get the note. And the note are the things that I've added for your reading pleasure and edification. And so every time you see one of these, you can click on it and you can read something that I've put together. But as you see, I'm not actually taking up space in the text itself, because that's the center of our attention. So here you have, just to give you sort of a foretaste of what we're going to talk about today. The principal themes in the 7 excerpts from the writings of Baha'u'llah that are collected here are number one, the rational faculty, which is another name for the soul. Number two is the nature of God, reminding us of the nature of God, because one of the earliest passages that we had in Gleanings was about the nature of God. The next one is about the day of God, which is also called the divine springtime, followed by the consciousness of souls after death. Again, we've seen that theme before, but this is from a different perspective. And then there's a very, very unusual passage, which is found in 87 and number 87. And that passage talks about the manifestations of God who lived before Adam. What? There were manifestations before Adam? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And Baha'u'llah states that with great confidence. And so then we have a very interesting for all of us who are up on the news is ADH, which talks about what is the essence and source of justice. Then we have a selection about the inexhaustible meaning of the word of God. Then we have on the question of the revelation of the names and attributes of God in all things. This is different from the revelation of God through the manifestation, which is chiefly through his person and his book. Okay? This is about the revelation literally of everything. When the Bob says that an ant, you can learn from an ant, this is what he's talking about. Being able to learn from these names and attributes of God's that are reflected in every creation. Then the next passage, which is in 91, speaks about a proof of the revelation of God in this age, particular to this dispensation and that of the Bab. And then finally, the final selection in this group of readings is number 92, which speaks about that supreme felicity and happiness is to be found in the next world for those who embrace this greatest revelation from God. So that gives you a snapshot of the topics that are going to be covered. So we actually do have some time for people to ask questions and make comments and participate. I'm going to make my remarks as succinct as possible. This first passage, which is number 83, talks about the soul of man. That's us. This is our reality that goes on after death, that survives the death of the body. And he says the most gripping thing that we can possibly read in this entire tablet is where he says the following. He says, "Wilt thou to ponder in thine heart from now until the end that hath no end, and with all the concentrated intelligence and understanding which the greatest minds have attained in the past or will attain in the future, this divinely ordained and subtle reality, the soul, this sign of the revelation of the all-abiding, all-glorious God, thou wilt fail to comprehend its mystery or to appraise its virtue. Having recognized thy powerlessness to attain to an adequate understanding of that reality which abideth within thee, thou wilt readily admit the futility of such efforts as may be attempted by thee or by any of the created things to fathom the mystery of the living God, the day star of unfading glory, the ancient of everlasting presence. The confession of helplessness, which mature contemplation must eventually impel every mind to make, is in itself the acme of human understanding and marketh the culmination of man's development. That statement in itself is so astonishing to us who are so accustomed to being able to understand everything. If I read enough, if I think enough, if I ask enough smart people the right questions, I can figure out anything. And here Baha'u'llah is telling us you can't even figure out who you are. You cannot figure out your actual reality, your soul. It's a tremendous lesson in humility. And one of my favorite passages that I love to revisit regularly. The next selection here, I'm going to read a little bit from the notes here. This is from a tablet that's called, that's in Persian, and it addresses one of the themes of the Law-i Hadi, which was also previously cited by Shoghi Effendi on the unknowability of the essence of God. And it doesn't leave us there. It explains that the way that we can understand God according to our human capacity, and this is according to our limited human capacity, there are boundaries to understanding, and that is through the manifestation. This is the closest we come to God. And there's a beautiful quote from the Kitab-i-Iqan that makes this very same point, which I've cited there, and I will encourage you to read it. And then we're going to go to this next passage here. And by the way, when you're entirely at liberty, if you wish, you can listen to me talk, and you can be scrolling through your own copy if you prefer, because the whole idea is we're looking at the text here. So this selection here is from a tablet to Zainul Abidin, who is this wonderful scribe whose copies of Baha'u'llah's writings were so accurate that Baha'u'llah said any other has to be subordinated to his copy. And Zainul Abidin was trained as a very specialized kind of lawyer in the Muslim tradition of his country. He was called a mujtahid. And this mujtahid thought of all kinds of questions to ask Baha'u'llah. And Baha'u'llah, in his great generosity of spirit, answered them all. And so we have those answers to Zainul Abidin's questions, and they are appended to the translation of the Kitab-i-Aqdas. There's a whole selection called Questions and Answers. That's what it is. And in this particular tablet that he wrote to Zainul Abidin, he explains, and this is really, in a sense, the punchline of this passage. He says, most of the commentaries and interpretations of the words of God now current amongst men are devoid of truth. Well, so much for going and studying them. Their falsity hath in some cases been exposed when the intervening veils were rent asunder. They themselves have acknowledged their failure in apprehending the meaning of any of the words of God. Our purpose is to show that should the loved ones of God sanctify their hearts and their ears from the vain sayings that have been uttered aforetime, and turn their inmost souls to him who is the dayspring of his revelation, and to whatsoever things he hath manifested. So this is a point that's made several times in the Kitab-i-Iqan. Several times Baha'u'llah says, turn to the manifestation. The manifestation can explain everything to you, and you'll get the truth. If you go and listen to somebody else, you're going to be led astray. It might sound lovely, but it's not true. And in particular, what it does is it gets you into the habit of thinking that mere human beings can tell you what is the truth and what is not the truth about things that are amazingly exalted above human understanding. But this has been going on for so long that we've come to regard it as normal and as impossible to avoid. This is now the selection here, 87, which is addressed to Abdul Razak, and where Baha'u'llah is talking about the history of progressive revelation, assuring his reader that progressive revelation began prior to Adam, and talking a little bit about the circumstances that are involved. But he makes a very important argument here in the very beginning. I just want to read this to you because it's something that we need to keep in mind when we're reading Baha'u'llah's writings. He says this: he's asked, how is it there are no records to be found concerning the prophets that have preceded Adam, the father of mankind, or of the kings that lived in the days of those prophets? And he responds, know thou that the absence of any reference to them is no proof that they did not actually exist. That no records concerning them are now available should be attributed to their extreme remoteness, as well as to the vast changes which the earth hath undergone since their time. So often we're going to find passages in the writings that seem very difficult for us to understand. And we think, well, my knowledge of things does not help me to understand what he's saying here. It doesn't make sense to me. We have to remember this principle, that just because we don't find references to something that the manifestation talks about doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means that the records are lost. And the records may be found again. This is one of the things that Eileen was giving a terrific course on biblical archaeology last spring, and then she continued in the summer. And her findings were that a lot of things that we only knew through sort of vague references in religious texts that were thousands of years old, we have now learned through archaeology, because I've actually found evidence that these things actually occurred. And what does that do? That should give us confidence that when the manifestation tells us something, they're telling us the truth. They can be trusted, they can be relied on. So I'll go next to the next part 2. And by the way, this particular passage that I just talked about, it ends with this challenging statement. Please God, thou wilt turn thine eyes towards the most great revelation and entirely disregard these conflicting tales and traditions. What does he mean by that? Does he mean we shouldn't study history? No. We know that's not his meaning, because he talked a lot about history in his writings, and so did Abdu'l-Baha. They wouldn't have done that if they didn't want us to study history. So what does he mean? Well, I think it's pretty clear, and certainly in the context in which he talks about this subject, that he wants us to understand that human judgment alone is not very reliable. Human beings disagree. We disagree for good reasons. Some of us have more information than others, but any of us have all of the information. And so what do we do when we conflict? We get upset and we become partisan, and we're defending one point of view over another point of view. And that's the root of war. That's the root of unhappiness. So Baha'u'llah is really encouraging people at even the level of studying history is to not fight over what it means. Don't look at the conflicting tales and traditions. Look at what the manifestation has told us. Learn from that unity of vision that he reveals. Because it's a new way of looking at things. It's a way that is really receptive to new information coming, but not accepting any information as being final. There is no finality. Even understanding the Word of God is not a final process. It's a progressive process. It's a dynamic process. Now I'll go on to the second group of texts. And here he's talking about justice. And this is actually from something called the paradise of justice, Razvan Adl. It's a tablet in Arabic that was addressed to a major servant of the cause at that time, Sayyid Muhammad Reza Shah Mirzadi. And he's explaining justice in a very, very powerful way. And I in the note, I included a statement about justice that was written by Abdul Baha in some answered questions. And I did that on purpose. The reason why I did that was because the one passage of that statement seems to reiterate the human normal perception of justice, which is know that justice consists in rendering to each his due. Everybody gets what they deserve, something of that nature. But even Abdul Baha gives a broader understanding of what that means, what justice means. In another of his tablets, and in there he says, the religion of God consists of two parts. One is the very foundation and belongs to the spiritual realm. That is, it pertains to spiritual qualities, virtues, and divine qualities. This part suffers neither change nor alteration. It is the Holy of Holies, which constitutes the essence of the religion of Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Christ, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah, and will endure throughout all the prophetic dispensations. And then he says, then there's the second kind. And the second kind of the teachings of religion are pertaining to a particular time, and they're valid for that particular time. But he puts the special emphasis, and he talks first of all about these perennial teachings. And this is for the reason that it's important for us to understand that the standard of justice that is set forth by the prophets is different from a human understanding. We have to grow spiritually in order to understand it. And that teaching, the essential teaching on justice, has not changed from dispensation to dispensation. It's only its application in a particular dispensation which has changed. And that's because that's what humanity needs at that particular time. Now we're going to go to 89. And here it's talking about a very important question, which I mentioned before, which is that the meaning of the Word of God will never be exhausted. This is why, rather than being given a commentary, for example, and certainly the Guardian could have done that, could have given us a commentary on the hidden words. and said, "You want to understand the hidden words? Read this commentary." He didn't do that. He didn't do that because it's up to us to read them. It's for us to discover meanings and never to believe that the meanings we've discovered are the only ones. It's going to be a constant search, and the search is preparing us for the life to come, because that life to come is going to be full of brand new things that we're not experiencing yet in this world. And he also points out in this same selection that he is not limited by what he reveals. So we shouldn't think that he didn't have anything else he could talk about. He could have talked about anything, but we weren't ready for it. He says, the beautiful language here, he says, of these truths, some can be disclosed only to the extent of the capacity of the repositories of the light of our knowledge and the recipients of our hidden grace. That's us. And even in the previous paragraphs, it says, how manifold are the truths which must remain unuttered until the appointed time is come. Even as it hath been said, no, not everything that a man knoweth can be disclosed, nor can everything that he can disclose be regarded as timely, nor can every timely utterance be considered as suited to the capacity of those who hear it. Always a really important thing. You remember the guardian encouraged all of us to study the gleanings very carefully before we go teaching. And this helps us to understand, because this principle alone needs to govern how we teach the faith. You don't teach the faith to everybody in the same way, because we don't have the same capacity. Neither do we as teachers, nor do the people who we're talking to. But we have to consider their needs, because that's, after all, what we're about when we're teaching. We're really paying attention to what do they need. So let me go to the next one. This is 90. And this is a passage from the Kitab Yagan, and you may be very familiar with this passage. It's talking about the universal revelation of the names and attributes of God. And then it's talking also about the other kind of revelation, which is the revelation through the manifestations. And then he makes a statement about progressive revelation that I found to be quite extraordinarily similar to what is written in the Gospels. So I cited a couple of passages from the Gospel of John and from the epistles of Paul, epistle to the Hebrews, which you can read, epistle to the Colossians as well. It's very interesting, but all of them are describing the manifestation as the first creation of God. And that's how Baha'u'llah describes the stuff. He says all else besides these manifestations live by the operation of their will and move and have their being through the outpourings of their grace. All things, therefore, all created things are coming to us through the manifestation. And here it's reiterated right in these words of the Gospel of John, and then, as I said, in the epistles of Paul. These are matters that obviously have to take a great deal of contemplation, and they're not necessarily grasped the first time you read them, although there may be some of you who pick them up very quickly. And this passage here is about this particular proof in this day and age, which is the phenomenon unparalleled in other religions of how many of these very learned men who were high up in the hierarchy of their various uh, religious denominations, have been attracted to the faith and who have actually given their lives in its service. And as you may recall, in the Kitab-i-Iqan, there's a list of some of the outstanding believers who came from such exalted backgrounds, who were martyrs to the faith. And this Baha'u'llah points out as one of the really exceptional signs of the potency of this revelation, that it even converted the clergy. The clergy are usually the last people who become believers in a new manifestation. That's one of the major themes of the Kitab-i-Iqan. But that's why it's so exceptional that this happened, that there have been great, great thinkers and spiritual leaders who embrace the faith. And just on a personal anecdote, I've met some myself. I've met priests who became Baha'is. I've met ministers who became Baha'is and devoted their lives to teaching the faith. And those were really inspiring people to me because I knew what they sacrificed. They had to start all over to find a job. The previous employment they had was no longer a possibility. Many of them lost their families, lost their friends, but they did it with joy because they had that experience with Baha'u'llah where they knew he's speaking the truth. I can't walk away. And then we have 92, which is the very last of the passages. And this is very, I want to read this passage. It's very short. And because it encapsulates it gives this most direct understanding of what the revelation of God is about. The book of God is wide open, and his word is summoning mankind unto him. No more than a mere handful, however, hath been found willing to cleave to his cause, or to become instruments for its promotion. These few have been endued with the divine elixir that can alone transmute into purest gold the dross of the world, and have been empowered to administer the infallible remedy for all the ills that afflict the children of men. No man can obtain everlasting life unless he embraceth the truth of this inestimable, this wondrous and sublime revelation. Who does that bring to mind for you? For me, it brings to mind Martha Root. How few in her generation of Baha'is devoted themselves to teaching the faith, but she did. And the Guardian said she is the greatest of the hands because she did. She left no stone unturned. She was constantly teaching the faith. And then he continues, incline your ears, O friends of God, to the voice of him whom the world hath wronged, and hold fast unto whatsoever will exalt his cause. He verily guideth whomsoever he pleaseth unto his straight path. This is a revelation that infuses strength into the feeble and crowneth with wealth the destitute. It's a revelation that people who never thought they would amount to anything become the greatest exponents of the teachings. This is one of the reasons why Abdu'l-Baha said of the native people, the indigenous peoples of the world, he said, when they become enamored of the faith and reborn with their connection with Baha'u'llah, they will take the message from the whole world. It makes sense, of course. This is what happens. This spirit that is going to have the greatest effect on those people who are abased, those people who are poor, those poor people who are not educated, those people who are treated badly. Like Martha Root, that tiny woman who was always facing difficulties. Can you imagine trying to become a journalist when she was a young woman? It was impossible. Journalists weren't women, they were men. You know? But she not only did it, she did it with distinction, with passion, with great capacity. Now I want to turn it over to you and ask for your comments about any of these things and your questions.
Um, I, I, well, I have two that I want to address right now. Um, um, because in the first part of uh of uh, of lesson 9, uh, 80, 85 85.2, like the second portion of 85. I know we already talked about this, but um I want I I want a little bit more clarification, I guess, because again, in 85.2, it uh it Baha'u'llah mentions the evil one, and yes, you can read it as a nature, but he gives the pronoun he. So so it sounds like he's talking about the nature, but then he identifies it as sort of a person or an entity in that passage. So I'm just uh I want to try to clear it up a little bit so I'm less confused.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about that one. And I'm going to welcome any comments from other people here. Just to get the ball rolling, let's say you look very carefully at what this says. The evil one is lying in wait, ready to entrap you. Gird yourselves against his wicked devices, and led by the light of the name of the one true God, deliver yourselves from the darkness that surroundeth you. So, what is he talking about? The darkness that surroundeth you. Okay. Okay. That's a very interesting thing because all of these things seem to talk about something that's external. This is the evil one. He's out there. He's going to get you. He's trying to figure out some way of getting into you and of messing with your life. Okay. And watch out because he's got all kinds of tricks. Okay. And then look at what Baha'u'llah says. What is supposed to be our response to this evil one? He doesn't say, pick up your sword and go hack at him. Right? No. The way to counter the evil one is not through violence. It's not through even zeal. It's not. It's not anything that we human beings would normally think. You know, when we think of if somebody invades my house, then I'm going to, defend it, fighting. You know, but that's not his solution. His solution is center your thoughts in the well-beloved rather than in your own selves. That seems too easy for a lot of us to be effective. But consider this. When we focus our thoughts on ourselves, we think about our inadequacies, we think about our entitlements, we think about our rights, we think about all kinds of things that we're basically we're looking at the mirror and saying, I'm important. Well, yes, you're important, but you're not created to spend your whole life celebrating your importance. The purpose of your life as a human being is right there in the short obligatory prayer. Thou hast created me to know thee and to worship thee, not to know me and to worship me. Right? Like my purpose in life is not to go and know and worship myself. If it were, then the manifestations would have told us a long time ago. And that would have been the message that we have gotten for thousands of years. But it's the exact opposite. We're supposed to be looking outside of ourselves. We're supposed to be looking at the unknowable essence. That's a stretch. It's really easy to focus your attention on something that's outside of you, that's tangible, that's something that will give you a benefit. I like you because you make me feel good. I like you because you cook good food. I like you because you're pretty. Those are all things where we're deriving benefit. But it's really hard to pin down how God is giving us benefits because he doesn't trumpet his benefits. We have to discover them for ourselves. And the benefit sometimes in following God's guidance is the exact opposite of what we thought. We thought he's going to make our lives easy and comfortable, and he doesn't. His blessing on us is to make our lives really, really difficult, really uncomfortable, because that's when we wake up. That's when we come to realize what the truth is. And that's when we are actually moved to do what he tells us will bring us eternal joy. And eternal joy, the most important thing he says, the best way in which we can prove that we've been transformed by the Holy Spirit and made into new creations is by teaching the faith. Because if we don't teach the faith, do we really think we're going to live in a perfect paradise in this world? We're just going to keep it all to ourselves, right? We'll have our small, tiny little Baha'i communities forever, for thousands of years to come. And we'll never transform society for the rest of humanity. And that's going to just be fine. No, it's not fine. It hasn't been fine. 1/4 of humanity is Christian. 1/4 is Muslim. Both of those faiths aspired to be universal, to convert everybody, and to make everybody happy together, living in harmony with one another. And they failed. Well, we could fail too if we don't take action. That's the thing. We have to take action, and the action is centered in our thoughts of the well-beloved, centered in our thoughts of Baha'u'llah and of God. So, in a sense, when Abdu'l-Baha says evil is illusion, it's not real, that's one solution. Just don't pay any attention to it. It's like darkness is the absence of light. Yes, it is. So that's one way to do this, is say, I'm just going to deny it exists and focus on good, right? Because, like you said, if you focus on good, then good things come to you and good things come to other people. But if you're focused always on evil, whether it's avoiding evil or actually being attracted to evil, you're playing with fire. It's never going to make you happy. But there's another way to look at it, and that is that all of this is internal. When you think about, remember that scene from the Gospel of Matthew where Jesus is having this dialogue with Satan. Do we really for a moment imagine that Satan is just incarnate and standing in front of him and giving him a hard time and making false promises and so forth? He's having a conversation with an actual entity. No, he's not. He's having an internal dialogue between that part of himself, which is a doubting, destroying, disruptive part. Every single one of us has that. We know that. And this is the great liberation that comes from Baha'u'llah, is because Baha'u'llah says it's there and it's real and you can escape it. You can conquer it. But you have to conquer it by doing something positive. And that's turning to the manifestation. The manifestation alone can give you the power to be able to overcome that. And again, I go back to Martha Root. Martha Root could have said, look, and I've got all kinds of things leagued against me. I'm just going to stay home and write articles for the local newspaper and, stay in my ancestral house. And that's all I'll do. That's all I'm comfortable with. But no, she didn't. She thought about God and she thought about Baha'u'llah and she thought about what Abdu'l-Baha had summoned the Baha'is to do. And it wasn't to stay home and feel sorry for yourself. And it wasn't to, be totally obsessed about all the evil that's happening in the world. You can. It's very easy to do that, and we all go through seasons when we get overwhelmed by the bad things that are happening around us. But we're not meant to be entrapped by it and disempowered by it, because then we don't do anything. Then it doesn't get better, And he assures us that as bearers of his light, that we have tremendous potential to influence other people for good. And it's not that we're going to be superhuman men and women. No, it's that we're going to be channeling the power of God. There's passage where we're going to see that later on, where Baha'u'llah says that if you see any good thing happen in your teaching effort, don't think it comes from you. It comes from God. Molly.
Yes. It is mentioned that the manifestations were the first to be created. In biblical scripture, it mentions when God says it's always we. And I always wondered about that. And now I can put two and two together, that he's speaking about we as with the manifestations. Do you get an essence of that?
That's one of the ways in which it's, again, the word of God has multiple meanings. So one of the things that we could recognize from reading that is the we is the manifestations. Yes, because there are multiple manifestations.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is that who uses the expression we? In all free democratic societies, who uses that expression? The king. That's what the king says. We have decided that, you're going to eat roast turkey for Thanksgiving. That's what the king does. The king does not say, I have decided. He never says I. He says, we have decided. Even the even King Charles says we very often. He lapses into that, even though it's very antiquated to say it nowadays,
Mhm.
because this is what kings have been doing forever. And so the manifestation is most definitely the king. He's the king of kings because he has the power and the wisdom and the right to tell people what to do.
Mhm.
All the kings can do is follow the orders of the manifestation. And if they don't follow the orders of the manifestation, then there's hell to pay. And that's something that Baha'u'llah talks about in a number of his tablets to the kings. He speaks very firmly to the kings about when they make decisions that are not based on the revelation of God, on the teachings of the manifestations. Very, very pointed. Like all your power comes from the manifestation, and don't you forget it. Because if you think you can make up your own stuff, then you're mistaken. It will come back to
Mhm.
haunt you,
Mhm.
and it will harm the people.
Mhm. And it
Your
mentions in
effect-
it
What?
mentions
Go
in,
ahead.
it mentions in Gleanings that kings are appointed, divinely appointed, to rule the people. And as
Hmm.
you say, if they don't behave, they'll be punished.
Hmm.
So I didn't realize that they were divinely appointed to rule the people.
There and and this is why in the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf, you can look this up. There's an extraordinary passage where Baha'u'llah is quoting the words of Jesus. You know that passage, the famous passage in the Gospels where it says, "Give unto Caesar
Caesar,
what is Caesar's, and
yes.
give unto God what is God's." Now, this has been interpreted a whole lot of different ways by Christians, but look at how Baha'u'llah interprets this. He says, look, the authority of the king is the same as the authority of God. He's the commander in chief. And you cannot have an ordered society if you don't have a strong ruler. You can't. It all falls apart.
That's right.
But the thing is that it's got that leader needs to be inspired and obedient to the law of God. And if he's not, then the damage, it's not just him who's punished, because we know most punishment happens in the next world anyway. You know, a lot of people get away with all kinds of stuff here, and we think, well, so how come they didn't, how come that tree didn't fall in the forest? Well, it's because it wasn't their time. And maybe everybody else needed to learn a lesson as well. But that that authority of of the ruler is very strongly emphasized in the writings. And Baha'u'llah says over and over, this is a manifestation of God. He says, I've always been obedient to you. Speaking to the Shah of Iran. Now, he had the power to disobey, but he didn't. He obeyed because he's setting a lesson. He's showing a model of how we need to behave. And when he says you need to follow authority, he's not saying authority when you feel like it or on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, but the rest of the time you can do whatever you want. No, we Americans are really, really in love with this idea that we can do whatever we want. But, Baha'u'llah says otherwise. In fact, in the Kitabi Akdas, he says that we approve of liberty in some cases, and in others we don't. It's God that calls the shots because he knows better what is good for us than we know for ourselves. That's the tremendous uh, uh, gift to us when we realize that the manifestation has always been loving us and caring more about us than we could even care for ourselves. And every commandment that comes from Baha'u'llah is a blessing for us. And but he knew that we're not going to be ready for that initially, because he didn't allow for the Kitabi Akdas to be published initially. He said, no, the Baha'is are not ready for this. Okay. And he only allowed it very gradually come out. And the Guardian was also very emphatic. I'm not going to publish the whole Kitabi Akdas while I'm alive. This is going to have to happen in the future. Because again, when you ask people to go and pioneer and 10% of them go pioneer, well, that's kind of an indicator that, well, I guess you're not really ready to see some of the more challenging teachings, that are going to ask even more of you, more self-sacrifice, more change. Angela has raised a hand.
Yes, thank you, Peter.
Mm.
So let me just lower the hand. You had said that when you talked about the evil one, that if we had anything to add to it, we could. I just want to read something from Gleanings 43.5 because it really struck me, and I kept it in a special place on my phone so I could have easy access to it.
Mm.
The evil one is he that hindereth the rise and obstructeth the spiritual progress of the children of men.
Mhm.
And to me, it's such a wonderful thing because it's anything within me that hindereth the rise and obstructeth my spiritual progress, anything that does it at a societal basis. Like it's so clear. I'm going to read it one more time because I think it's so profound. The evil one is he that hindereth the rise and obstructeth the spiritual progress of the children of men.
Mhm.
And I think, you can meditate on that a lot. And it says it all right there.
Mhm. Now, those of you who have read the Gospels, I'm guessing most of you have read the Gospels, and maybe you started reading them when you were a child. And you're familiar that there are a lot of references to devils and to Satan. And you know that lots of theologians have taught that these are meant literally, and they refer to actual beings that exist either supernaturally or in the physical world that are afflicting us. No? And sometimes we even use that language to disparage each other when we get very frustrated. We say, you're acting like a demon, I think really what I've noticed in my study of the Gospels inspired by the Baha'i teachings is that Jesus actually spelled out where evil comes from. It's just that people didn't pay attention, okay? Because he was having a conversation with some Pharisees who were giving his followers a hard time because they didn't wash their hands properly before eating. Don't we all know people who are like that? And also because they were picking corn out of a cornfield to eat when they were hungry on the Sabbath. Oh, no. You can't do that. You can't eat on the Sabbath. Or maybe you can only eat if somebody else prepared the food, like your wife or something. And then, maybe you can eat under those circumstances. Otherwise, it's work and you're forbidden to work. So what does he say in response to them? He says, you don't understand. Nothing outside of you can do your harm. Nothing. The only thing that can do you real harm is what comes from inside of you. All of your wicked, depraved thoughts and inclinations, those are the things to be scared of. Those are the things to fight. Those are the things to resist. This is Jesus talking. I wasn't expecting to find this quotation, but I was really, I was delighted because this is what I hear Abdu'l-Baha saying. The very same thing. Replace your negative thoughts with positive ones. Instead of looking at, decaying body of the dead dog, look at the gleaming white teeth of that dog. You can always find something positive to say. And this is how he taught the faith to people, was to look at the positive. He didn't go in there with a battle axe and beat them over the head, telling them, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. No, that's no way to attract a soul. You can't convince anybody that way. He was gentle and kind and loving and wise. It takes a lot of wisdom. So yes, thank you so much for that quote. Diana has raised her hand.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to what Angela was saying. And the writings tell us that evil is the absence of good. So in truth and in fact, the absence of good is what we personify as Satan, the devil, or the evil one. So the writings also tell us that it represents the animal ego or self-centered side of man's nature, because it has a potential for doing things that are not good. Shoghi Effendi defines the ego as follows. The ego is the animal in us, the heritage of the flesh, which is full of selfish desires. By obeying the laws of God, seeking to live the life laid down in our teachings and prayers and struggle, we can subdue our ego. So this evil one is a personification or a representation of our self-centeredness or ego, or the animal side, the lower, our lower nature. So I just wanted to add to that. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And that these are all perspectives pointing in the same direction, because they're all pointing to the fact that we're being called to rise above what we have appeared to be. We're born with certain tendencies, and we sometimes spend years being encouraged in things that are not, they're not helpful to us, that are not good for us. And our opportunity and our challenge when we become spiritually mature is to stop relying on that pattern of life and to break out of it and to find the liberty, the freedom that's to be found when you're doing God's will rather than your own will. And once you start doing that, it doesn't get easy, because you still have this part of you that's resisting. And that's reinforced for many people, by their families, by their friends, by their culture. And I think about, for example, the advent of divine justice, that spectacular letter of the Guardian. And there are counsels in that letter that we still have a hard time reading, because it's stern. It's very stern. When he talks about how corrupt and debased and animalistic so much of our popular culture is, he was talking back in the 1930s. And just think about what has happened between then and now. What used to be regarded as shocking is now regarded as normal. So we're surrounded by darkness that people don't even recognize as darkness. So it becomes more and more of a challenge for us, and still a challenge that we must do our very best to take up and pursue, because this is what is going to attract people to the faith. It's not what we say, it's what we do. It's who we are. When people can tell when you're a real person and you really care. A lot of us became attracted to the faith that way. We have to remind ourselves when the going gets tough that people are watching us, and how we respond to challenges in life is very important, not just for us, but for those around us. Well, friends, if there's one more question or comment, I invite you to give it. Otherwise, I think we will let the sleepy folk. I know some of you, it's getting up to about 11 o'clock at night. So
I hope that helps Michelle, who was asking about the evil one.
Yes,
That's helpful.
it, it the all of the explanations have been helpful to 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 clarify um Baha'u'llah's meaning here in scripture, and coinciding with what the faith teaches.
Very good. Thank you.
And
I was hoping it would help.
yes, thank you. Thank everybody who shared. Um, I had one more question, and I'll try to make it quick. We'll see what it turns into. um, um, because I think on some level, when I was exploring the faith and 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 being touched by it, but then uh, seeing others uh, who in my comparison to from myself to them, I was like, oh, they're they seem to be way more faithful than me, and I can't. And I was kind of comparing myself, which is I know which is a bad thing to do, to the other person. But I was like, I don't know if I could ever be that faithful with that, and I'm struggling. I'm struggling with it right now, like back then, and I'm still over analytical and I overthink a lot. But I think I let portions of the doubt in myself, the evil one in that essence, get the better of me, because I did declare as a Baha'i at one time, but now I'm back to a practicing Latter-day Saint, um, because I let myself think that compared to other people, I could never measure up, and I just kind of took that away from myself. And from what you say here, and from what Baha'u'llah says about um, in your notes about um, believing in the current manifestation and kind of not turning away, I kind of hope I didn't do that in sort of a, like, I don't think it was a malicious way, but I hope God sees that I sees my intentions what weren't to turn away. Just probably overthinking it too. If you
Mitchell,
understand
Mitchell,
what
what you're struggling with, there are millions of people who struggle with self-doubt, with being overly critical, with being with feeling that they aren't adequate. And it's okay because we have a way out. And the way out is prayer, because those prayers uplift our souls. Those prayers remind us, I was a gnat and you can create me into an eagle. You can take my tiny little self concept, my feeling about myself, and you can destroy it by blowing it up and showing me really how great a soul I am, inexplicably great. And it's not because we're going to become full of ego. It's because we become full of God's grace and God's power. And that is something that you can experience in prayer. Prayer is a very, very powerful thing. And not just praying once a day, and not just praying at feasts and praying at firesides or praying at Ruhi classes, but praying when you need it most. When you're really down, when you're really struggling, pick out that prayer book and say a prayer, or just talk to God directly. Because that relationship gives us the strength. That relationship is remembering that He's always there. He's always there and He's ready to help. Diane wants to say something. Go ahead, Diane.
Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. Tuesday evening, Wednesday evening, our holy days. The all day Wednesday, all day Thursday, the twin holy days, the birthdays of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Are we going to be having class next Wednesday evening?
That's a good point. What do you think, Jeremiah?
We can skip next Wednesday and we'll just add it on to the end of the schedule. Okay.
Perfect.
Is that okay,
Thank you
everybody?
so very much.
Yeah, I don't want to be an obstacle to you going and celebrating the twin birthdays. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you so much. We'll add one day onto the end in December. Perfect answer.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Yes. And I'll be thinking about all of you when we celebrate the holy days, the twin birthdays next week.
Thank you.
Aloha.